Hello world! Welcome and welcome back to the channel, and to this video that should have been uploaded 3 days ago, in which I celebrate the anniversary of my web series project, The Caged Underworld. For those of you who don't know, The Caged Underworld was an indie animation project I first conceptualized back in 2013 and detailed the quest and misadventures of two ghosts who are tasked with reaping souls as they aim to rule over the land of the dead together. In recent years, I tried to post a video about the series on or around October 10th, which was the exact date that I first got the idea to make it, and for this year I chose to draw all 12 main characters with a Sanrio character that I feel best represents them, inspired by so many of the Sanrio collaborations with other anime and game IPs I've seen in recent years. I have two separate videos in which I do a full-on deep dive of the lore and plot of the entire narrative and its characters, so feel free to check those out. Now, under normal circumstances, I would try to upload a TCU anniversary celebration as a bonus video on the exact day of the anniversary, but as you probably noticed, I'm deep in the Clocktober trenches right now, and I didn't think I'd be able to upload a bonus video for the actual day, in addition to my usual bi-weekly long-form video upload that I didn't want to put on hold during this recent clock tower fever. So my solution was to trim the fat by having my annual The Caged Underworld video be part of my regular video lineup. Even then, I wasn't able to get those videos done in time, and this week in particular I ended up falling way behind on my Clocktober pieces, so once this video is finally done I'll have to grind to get myself caught up again. So the character I'm drawing now is the first of our main protagonists, Weltraum, and as you can see, the Sanrio character I chose for him was Marumofubiyori. As I was brainstorming these matchups between Sanrio characters and my OCs, there was one unexpected hitch I ran into, which was that when determining which characters would be the best match for the Caged Underworld's cast, I had to separate my perception of my OC's personality from their personality as it was actually depicted in the created material. Using Weltraum as an example, he was originally intended to be like a beautiful and deadly kind of character who could be pretty hot-headed, smug, and condescending, but shortly after creating him, he morphed into a nerdy, ineffectual baby meow meow, so that was part of the reason why I chose Marumofubiyori for him, because I felt like he better fit the latter characterization of Weltraum than the former. How many of you guys have had an experience where you made an OC with a very specific idea of what you wanted their personality and attitude to be like, only for them to turn into a completely different character once you let them loose and started developing them further? Anyway, you may remember from my other TCU videos that Weltraum is a sleepy boy and aquariums play a prominent role in his backstory, so those attributes made him a really good fit for Marumofubiyori. On top of that, because Weltraum wears a red ribbon in his hair, I wanted to draw a parallel between that and Moppu's toy grab, Kainikama, but for a while I didn't know if I wanted to go any further with dressing Moppu in Weltraum's accessories. I didn't want to dress Moppu up in anything that would cover his belly button because that seemed like an important part of his design that shouldn't be altered. It's like drawing pom-pom pudding without his butthole. We live in a society of rules and they need to be obeyed. Eventually I got to looking up other collab merchandise of Marumofubiyori for reference, and I saw there were plenty of different artists who drew him wearing clothes. The one that stood out to me the most was the crossover between him and Twilight Vivia from Raincoat, although for the purposes of my imaginary collaboration I still felt more comfortable having him only wear Weltraum's ribbon on top of his usual blanket. The second character in the lineup, our story's co-protagonist, Weltraum's boyfriend, and my favorite character from this project in general, is Kleinod. For Kleinod's Sanrio character, I was seriously torn between two that I thought fit him perfectly, those being Monkichi and Choco Cat. Even as I was writing the script for this video, I was still undecided, but I eventually settled on Monkichi. One of Kleinod's defining traits is his deep love for cats, so Choco Cat felt really appropriate for him, but a few of his other main characteristics are his optimism, his habit of making terrible puns like they're going out of style, and his large appetite, which are all qualities that overlap with Monkichi, hence why he ended up beating out Choco Cat. According to his bio, Monkichi can eat 10 bananas in 1 minute, a number that is probably equal to or slightly under the amount of cigarette packs Kleinod burns through in one day, which inspired me to draw this specific interaction between the two of them, where Kleinod is smoking and Monkichi is eating a stick of banana flavored Pocky. You can tell from the sketch that I was originally going to add boxes from those items to the composition, but I discarded that idea pretty quickly because then I would have to add similar themed decorative elements to the other 11 pieces, and I just wanted to focus on the characters. For some reason, I always have a difficult time coming up with poses when drawing Kleinod specifically. My instinct is to always give him more extroverted body language when that's actually kind of out of character for him. He's more on the subdued side. I think it's because Kleinod's role in the story was supposed to be the airheaded comic relief himbo, and I associate that archetype with a character who's more wild and crazy, while Kleinod himself airs on the side of mild and lazy. So when drawing him, I really have to think consciously about what kind of pose to draw him in, because finding one doesn't really come naturally to me, and this one felt just right. Even though I made sure to give Kleinod Monkichi's ears and tail, I I completely forgot to give Monkichi any of Kleinod's accessories and didn't realize it until after I had exported the final file. Oops. It doesn't bother me too much, but still, just use your imagination to pretend Monkichi is wearing Kleinod's geta. Our third character is the story's main antagonist and ruler of the land of the dead, Sterbenfrau, and the Sanrio character I paired her with is Kuromi. Similar to Kleinod, I had a really hard time settling on who I wanted Sterbenfrau's counterpart to be. Like, originally I wanted Kuromi to be representing her from the very beginning, but at the time my melody didn't appear in the lineup at all, and it felt incorrect to have one without the other, so Retsuko felt like the next best option considering Sterbenfrau was a singer in her past life, although I wasn't completely sold on it. I still thought Kuromi was the best fit. Eventually though, I was able to find a character that I thought was the best match for my melody, and you'll see who that is later on in the video, so that enabled me to finally pull the trigger and pair Kuromi up with Sterbenfrau, and I'm so glad that I did. Their color schemes and intricacies of their designs complement each other so well. Halloween also happens to be Kuromi's birthday, so happy early birthday at the time of my uploading this video, Kuromi! Talking about my process creating this artwork for a second, I did something a little unorthodox, knowing that I would be utilizing the screen recorded footage from within the program, which was starting each drawing in one software and then finishing it in another. In this case, I did the sketches and line art in Procreate because I thought the quick shape features would come in handy as far as getting the line art done faster, since all these pieces were drawn using really simple and round shapes, and then I did all the coloring in Club Studio Paint. I'm just a lot more comfortable doing rendering in that program and knew I'd be getting a better looking result in a shorter amount of time. This year gave me a lot of practice with drawing chibis, and I was kind of stumbling around a little bit before I eventually stumbled on a style that felt really right to me. Slightly taller than the average chibi at around 2.5 to 3 heads tall, large hands and daikon legs. I do really love drawing Android style chibis too, but this particular method just clicks with me. Something about those proportions gives me an early 2000s character design vibe that I really resonate with. Nostalgia is my Roman Empire, so it kinda tracks. Now, because of my recent fan art spree, there are some elements of my art style that I would normally add but didn't at the time, which was an intentional choice given the nature of what I was working on. And once I started drawing this chibi series, I had to remind myself of those details partway through. Like, oh yeah, I normally add separation lines during the rendering step, huh? It's a good thing I remembered to do that by the time I got to this piece because there's so much black on black that would get melded together otherwise. Next up is Weltraum and Kleinod's soul-reaping rival Foppen, and the Sanrio character I chose for him is Hangyodon. So it was at this point where I ran into a pretty major problem with the execution of this video, because I had written a memo for myself on Google Notes where I listed each character from the Cage Underworld and their corresponding Sanrio character, but once it came time for me to write the script for my voiceover, I tried to search for the original note and couldn't find it anywhere. I don't know if I had accidentally deleted it or what, but it just vanished without a trace, and I was beginning to panic because there were some character pairings that I couldn't rely on memory for anymore. Fortunately, I did share a work in progress screenshot of my list on the Fanmade World Discord server. It was a little outdated, but it was still a jumping off point for me to reconstruct some of the pairings that I have forgotten since I made my final draft of my list. In that list, Hangyodon was originally partnered up with Weltraum, but once I realized Marumofubiyori was a better fit for that character, I chose to give Hangyodon to Foppen instead. Their matchup works a little too well in my opinion. I also contemplated assigning Bad Badtz-Maru to Foppen because Badtz-Maru is a penguin and Foppen has a strong connection, let's say, to another penguin-loving character in the Cage Underworld's cast. If you know, you know. However, Badtz-Maru was the ideal pick for another character who will be appearing later on in the speedpaint, so Hangyodon ended up going to Foppen anyway. Poor guy, getting truffle shuffled around my OC cast like this. But hey, at least he finally found a companion, and who better than Foppen for a fish character to be associated with, because Foppen's a Hoge has always reminded me of a fishing lore. Ironically, after I failed in writing Weltraum as a deadly Bishonen archetype, when I first conceptualized Foppen, I tried to have him fill that spot which Weltraum loved vacant, but that also ended up backfiring and he just ended up turning into a pathetic womanizer basically. I guess every character has to serve a specific purpose in any given story, and Weltraum and Foppen were just not vibing with the roles I originally had in mind for them, which to me feels like a reflection of my own immaturity at the time and is more proof that the story wasn't ready to be released in the time frame I originally intended for it, mostly because of the high school age author with raging hormones part. Our fifth member of the cast is the story's FMC, Kotori Miyazawa, and for her I chose Littletwinstars. Picking a Sanrio character for Kotori was surprisingly difficult because there were a lot of strong contenders for her. My first instinct was to go with Tuxedo Sam, since penguins are Kotori's favorite animal and she's heavily associated with them throughout the series, but ultimately I went with Kiki and Lala. Because Kotori's lore involves prince and princess characters, who coincidentally bear a striking resemblance to Kiki and Lala, and were tragically underutilized within the story itself, I really wanted to give them their chance to shine here by dressing Kiki and Lala in their outfits, and in turn having Kotori wear clothes inspired by Kiki and Lala's dresses themselves. I tried to post Kiki and Lala based on what the prince and princess characters themselves do, which kind of felt slightly cursed knowing how sinister these two characters of mine really are deep down inside. I know I've been pointing out how these characters have a way smaller role in the story than they deserve, but there's another group of characters who had this problem, and coincidentally they're also linked to Kotori, those being her 6 brothers and sisters. I don't think I've had any rhyme or reason for giving her so many siblings, which is a shame considering how pervasive the fairy tale undertones are with Kotori's arc, and how symbolic the number 7 is in those kind of stories. Like, come on, it was right there! I wish I knew what I was thinking back then when I decided to give her such a large family, because I would have had to animate and find voice actors for all of these additional characters. So this was my very first time drawing Littletwinstars. It was my first time drawing the vast majority of these Sanrio characters actually. But for these characters in particular, I wasn't expecting their designs to be as intricate as they were. What I mean by that is they're drawn in such a simplified style, so I naturally assumed that every part of them was simplified. But no, there are some areas that are more detailed than others, specifically their hands. Each hand has 5 fingers and they're actually really delicately rendered compared to other parts of their bodies like their faces, which you probably can't simplify anymore if you tried, and it was really interesting to try and replicate that in my artwork because it kind of challenged my instincts in terms of the order of operations of what gets stylized when drawing art in a more simple style. Kind of related to that point, drawing both Kotori and Foppen made me realize how I need to do some studies to practice wavy hair because I'm not good at it. The hair always seems to be following its own physics and I kind of hate it. So hopefully one day, after drilling this subject in my head for however long I need to, I'll be able to consistently draw hair that looks good and that I can be proud of. Moving on to the supporting cast of characters, we have Morgen, a member of the Land of the Dead's law enforcement, and her Sanrio character is Bad Badtz-Maru. As soon as I read his bio and saw that his hobby is collecting pictures of famous people, I knew he would be the perfect match for Morgen because one of her defining characteristics is that she only reaps the souls of deceased celebrities. It does feel a little weird giving a penguin character to someone other than Kotori, but assigning anyone else to Morgen felt like messing with perfection. I did run into a problem though, which was that there were no accessories to Badtz-Maru that I could add to Morgen in order to make them look like an ensemble. I could have him wearing her glasses, but other than that, the only thing he really had to offer was the spikes on top of his head, which I didn't want to incorporate in Morgen's design because that would change her silhouette too much, so she kind of sticks out a little bit compared to the other characters in this set. But overall, I still like how she turned out, and I think the pose that I drew her of Badtz-Maru in is really cute. If I'm being honest, Morgen in particular, and by extension the next 2 to 3 characters after her in this lineup, to me represent the Cage Underworld's dark era, where I was suffering trying to figure out where I wanted the story to go, and being completely aimless on how to achieve that purpose, which led to me shoving a bunch of random characters and disjointed subplots into the story to try and pad it out with the hope of making it more complex, but really I had no idea what I was doing. Seriously, if you cut these characters out of the story altogether, very little if anything would change, and they don't add any value with their presence. I never want to give up on an OC though, even if they're no longer a fit for the project I initially created them for, so maybe in the future I can find a way to give Morgen and some of these other characters a new lease on life. Who knows? After Morgen comes her younger twin sister Nacht, and her Sanrio pair is Cinnamoroll. I thought he would be a really good fit for her as a way to create a balance with Morgen, since Cinnamoroll's all white and Badtz-Maru is all black. Plus I thought Nacht's puffy hat and shorts and her hair accessory all tied in really well with Cinna's overall design philosophy, so they seem like a really adorable pairing. Plus the subspecies that ghost Nacht belongs to is associated with milk, which is another reason why I thought Cinna would be an ideal match for her. Nacht has always been a character who I felt weird about drawing, or even the idea of drawing, and that's mostly because a key part of her character design is that her feet are backwards, so that's fans always left me with this concern about how I would pose or animate her without it looking too awkward. Now that I think about it, there seems to be a theme where I felt trapped by a design I chose for a character for this story, and instead of changing it into something I felt more comfortable with, I kind of just tried to make it work anyway despite my reservations. I went through the exact same ordeal with Kleinod, which is why he's the only character I've drawn for and since the 10th anniversary celebration whose design isn't 100% faithful to his original appearance from the series. Another weird part of Nacht's design that I had to figure out for this drawing was whether or not she would be wearing gloves, because in my video where I finished sketches from the comic spinoff, her hands were bare, but in my Trust Me meme she was wearing pink gloves, so I had to settle on one or the other. Ultimately, I chose to make her hands bare just because giving her the gloves made the amount of pink in her design too unbalanced in my opinion. And I think her not having gloves also helps tie her in with her sister since Morgen doesn't wear them either. Despite having to contend with these status effects, I'm a big fan of how her piece turned out. It looks like she and Sin are having a lot of fun together. Lastly, for this small subgroup of characters is Ratten, a shape-shifting stoner who was friends with the twins when they were all still alive and has a huge crush on Morgen. For his Sanrio character, Pokopon's diary felt like a perfect match in a number of ways. Not among the least of which being that Pokopon's diary is a tanuki, which in Japanese folklore are depicted as tricksters with the ability to shapeshift, so that's a match for Ratten. And because my sense of humor is just that unsophisticated, there was no way I could pass up changing the shape of Pokopon's diary's leaf to better reflect Ratten's recreational habits. It needed to happen. So it was around this point of the drawing process that I started to make a lot of sloppy mistakes due to time crunch. Like, you can tell in the footage that I forgot to add Pokopon's diary's tail to Ratten for the longest time, and even a little bit earlier on I forgot to add the pink racing stripes to Morgen's jumpsuit. So reaching the halfway point of this character lineup, I ended up spending quite a bit of time correcting different oversights I probably wouldn't have made if I wasn't under pressure of deadlines. Who would have thought trying to juggle a daily drawing challenge while also working on 12 different character pieces for a long form video that you have to write a script or record a voiceover for at the same time would be really difficult, am I right? I guess I could have circumvented this by drawing my art that I know has a deadline way ahead of schedule when I have more free time, so that when the time came for me to upload a video or post an entry for whatever day the drawing prompt list I'm on, I can have all that ready to go from the beginning. But this isn't something I'm really comfortable doing, because if I prepare my drawings too far in advance, then I worry that in the time leading up to when that art is meant to be shared publicly, I'll begin incorporating new techniques or stylization choices or overall just improve in general, so that when it comes time for the art I originally made to go live, it'll look out of place compared to my newer artwork. Case in point, literally like this past week I discovered an artist called 𝚢𝚒𝚒𝚐𝚎, and through their speed paints I discovered a new time-saving method for coloring my line art that I put into practice for the first time for the series of chibi illustrations. I like it a lot more than my previous method of adding color fills and want to experiment with it more so I can incorporate it in my art going forward. But of course, this talk about time-saving measures is academic since this video still ended up being really late anyway. Anyway, here's Ratten's piece all done. Seeing Pokopon's diary wearing his clothes is a little cursed. Like, in his normal attire he looks really cute and formal, but here he looks like he belongs in one of the Fast and Furious movies, and I don't know how I feel about that. Now it's time to draw the story's resident tall, dark, and muscular man who definitely doesn't become relevant to the plot because he was hired by one of the villains or anything. Schutze! The Sanrio character, or rather group of characters as the case may be, that I chose for him were Goropikadon. I didn't even have to think twice about choosing these guys for Schutze. First of all, they're clearly based off of Oni, demons from Japanese mythology known for having superhuman strength, which definitely tracked with Schutze being the buffest character in the series. Goropikadon also wear tiger striped diapers that are evocative of an Oni's classic pelt loincloth, so I knew right away I had to combine that detail of their design with the pinstripes on Schutze's suit. I didn't find this out until way later on in the process, but going back to Pokopon's diary for a little bit, the Thunder God is included in his list of dislikes, and of course Oni are associated with having powers of thunder and lightning, which ties into Ratten having animosity towards Schutze in canon because Ratten sees Schutze as the rival for Morgen's affection. I'm telling you, this crossover basically drew itself. Speaking of Ratten, returning to my earlier topic of trying and failing to manage my time for this month's articles, part of that was in no small part due to me being horribly distracted when I was supposed to be working on both Clocktober and the Sanrio crossover, and it was around the time that I started working on Schutze's illustration that my ADHD decided to stab me in the back. I kind of joked about this in my most recent webcomic update, but Clock Tower is a huge source of artistic inspiration for me, so for the 30th anniversary this year, I was seizing every opportunity I could to contribute to the event by creating as much fan art as I possibly could, and after being in a lengthy fugue state of September 14th, give it up for September 14th, where I was eating, sleeping, and breathing Clock Tower fan art non-stop, eventually I reached a stage where I was like, I miss my OC's Tails, only instead of applying those feelings to motivating me to stay on schedule working on my long long-form videos for TCU Day, my mind was wandering with developing ideas for my next manga project, brainstorming how I can revamp my social presence to better showcase my original stories and characters, and spending hours upon hours daydreaming about extremely self-indulgent AUs with my characters. Even though I'm mad at myself for not finishing my art as quickly as I planned, I still have a strong will to see both this video and this month's drawing challenge through to the end and giving my all in each piece I create, even if it takes me a little longer to get there. With that being said, Schutz's pizza's done. I think it turned out really cute, especially the way Goropikadon looked with his sunglasses and coat. Like, all I can think of when I look at them are the elite beat agents. So next is Donner, one of Sterbenfrau's former soul reaping partners and Kleinod's past mentor, and his Sanrio character is Keroppi. So Donner was another character whose pairing I had forgotten when I lost the final draft of my outline, but I retroactively chose Keroppi for him for a couple of reasons. First reason, Keroppi's character role involves him being very talented, but sometimes he attempts to do things that he isn't good at, which reminded me of Donner's trait of being an edgy tryhard who brags about his action hero level accomplishments despite not having any receipts to substantiate his claims. The second reason is specifically an allusion to Donner's relationship with Kleinod in the latter's backstory movie. In earlier drafts of the fanime, Kleinod had a curious association with Frog, so with that in mind, giving Keroppi to Donner felt even more warranted. When I chose this matchup, however, it didn't occur to me until later on that I would have to make extra sure that Donner Sanrio's alter of his usual costume wasn't too similar to Foppen, since both Keroppi and Hangyodon wear red bow ties and don't have a lot of other accessories. But fortunately, I did already draw Foppen with Hangyodon's gills, so that was enough to help set the two of them apart. I don't know what it is about my Donner artwork, but every time I've drawn him as part of the Cage Underworld's ensemble following the 10th anniversary, his pieces always end up being my favorites. It happened with his sketch page in my video where I finished the thumbnails for the story's comic spin-off, and it happened again here for the Sanrio collab. I guess I must really like his design and personality. Hopefully I can find a way to give him a bigger role in the reboot than he had in the original fanime, because I'm actually kind of attached to him and I think he's pretty underrated amongst the Cage Underworld's cast. Speaking of Donner, next up we have his cousin Schnee, who is another one of Sterbenfrau's former soul reaping partners, and the Sanrio character I chose for her is My Melody. Alternatively, I think I did briefly consider Pom Pom Pudding for her. So yes, this is the character I alluded to before, who enabled me in choosing Kuromi for Sterbenfrau's character. I thought a rabbit would be an appropriate animal to pair with a character who's always looking sad, and Schnee actually does have a connection to Sterbenfrau in the actual story, depending on how you're willing to interpret being tricked into ascending to the afterlife by your teammate who's trying to obstruct justice as a connection. It's kind of funny that I chose Keroppi and My Melody for the only other two OCs besides Morgen and Nacht that are related to each other, because I've had a connection with those characters since I was a little girl. Back then I had elastic headbands of the two of them that I would wear on a daily basis, and specifically there was a hat that I decorated with my Keroppi headband. I think I still have the My Melody one, but I lost the Keroppi one a long time ago after my hat got stolen from a church bathroom one fateful night. I mentioned earlier that I'm working on a reboot of the Cage Underworld. Instead of an animated series, I'm planning to tell the story in the form of a comic. Since it's been a while, I feel like I owe you guys an update on how things are going with this project. Currently, I'm nowhere near a final draft, or even a first draft for that matter, but the story does have a rough plot skeleton from beginning to end, and I have a plan for how long the series will be. 9 books in total, with each volume being a standard graphic novel length of about 250 pages, so already I have a better grasp on where the story is going with this reboot than I did with the original version. I've written enough stories in my youth that died on the vine and have subsequently tried to revamp as I've gotten older, and it's taken me this long to notice that the further the new draft deviates from its original version, the less fun I have working on it. So recently I've come to realize that if I approach my reboot from the perspective of me trying to fix the plot holes of the original story and exploring upon its potential that I never dove deep into, then the process becomes a lot more enjoyable. So that's what I'm trying to do with this new version of the Cage Underworld. Unfortunately, this means that I have to go back and reread my old scripts and outlines, which will no doubt be a painful experience, but it's a necessary evil that I have to face eventually, so I just have to grin and bear it. This puts my 10th anniversary video in a bit of a weird position, since I left no stone unturned as far as revealing the plot and spoilers, thinking none of that information would be relevant anymore in the rewrite. But now that I made a conscious decision to bring the reboot closer in line to the original fanime, now anyone who watches that video will have an idea of what to expect in the new version. It's not too bad though. The plot setting and certain events are still completely different from the fanime. Like, instead of reaping souls in the land of the dead, the characters are now trying to survive a killing game set within a social credit system, and Kotori isn't a main character anymore, so there's going to be a different conflict for Weltraum and Kleinod to grapple with over the course of the plot. Either way, I'm in a way better state now than I was when I first created the story back when I was a teenager, and I have a much clearer, more purposeful conceptualization of what I want to accomplish with this project. So even if the journey to reaching a final draft is still slow, at least I'm having fun instead of being lost and confused at every turn. With all that being said, this video is almost ready to start winding down, so now it's time to meet our final character for this lineup. Last but not least is Timu Bhagwan Rajneesh. I mean Sterbenfrau, a character exclusive to Kleinod and Weltraum's backstory movies who seeks to reform the land of the dead, and his Sanrio character is Pochako, although 𝚖𝚒𝚒𝚕 was also in the running at one point. As I understand it, Sanrio used Snoopy from Peanuts for marketing back in the 1960s, and after they lost the rights, they created Pochako to be a sort of replacement for Snoopy, so I thought he would be a perfect match for Sterbenfrau given the latter's unusual past, which I won't go into detail about due to spoilers, but you can learn more about through my 10th anniversary retrospective video. In that same video, I complained about how Sterbenfrau was this wipe of Halciform from Slayers, and in retrospect I've come to realize that he also has a lot in common with Akio from Revolutionary Girl Utena, which is to say he has a very dark and twisted personality, so drawing him with silly little dog ears and a tail fell directly into that so wrong is right category for me because of how incongruent it is with his canonical presentation. Now, Sterbenfrau's powers are themed around tarot cards, so whenever I draw him, I try to depict cards from the major arcana that represent a larger theme symbolic to him and their meaning, and of course that meant I also had to do the same for Pochako here. I tried picking cards that I felt best suited their personalities, and after looking at the meanings of different cards, I chose High Priestess for Sterbenfrau. I feel like both the upright and reverse meanings of that card describe Sterbenfrau's personality in the original story to a T, and for Pochako, I felt like the sun was a good match for a character as cute and upbeat as he is. So even though Sterbenfrau is the last character in the set, his piece was actually the first one I colored, which meant that it took me the longest because I had to make a lot of decisions for the first time that would be forming a template as to what style I would color the rest of the cast in. To be fair, adding all the small details to the tarot cards definitely played a part in why coloring his piece took me longer than the others. Starting the coloring process with this piece though was kind of interesting because it specifically had Pochako in it, and I wanted to stay true to the aspects of his character design that were unique to him and weren't necessarily shared with the other Sanrio characters, like the gaps in his line art and the sketchiness of his ears. So overall it was a pretty fun first foot forward into the process of creating all this artwork, and I actually got to repeat that same process with Ratten and Pokopon's diary too. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to practice, Sterbenfrau, you weirdo. So here's the final lineup for this OC Sanrio collaboration. I'm curious, did I happen to draw your favorite character for this crossover? For me, my all-time favorite character is Hoshinamaguwa, but Marumofubiyori is a very close second, so I'm very glad I got to include him here. If you have any OCs of your own, or just a niche fandom that hasn't had a Sanrio collab of its own, which characters would you pick for whom? Until the days leading up to where I would finally upload this video, I didn't realize how much I missed these OCs until I drew them here, and I wish I could post about them regularly again, but since I am working on a reboot, I don't want to create any confusion between the old outdated version of the Cage Underworld and its newer version, so the least I can do is use those feelings as motivation to continue working on my other stories I have in the works leading up to TCU's revamp, because I have so many comics and OCs that I can't wait to release onto the greater web. And hey, if you enjoyed this video in any way and want to see more OC content from me in the near future, then I hope you'll consider subscribing so you can be introduced to my funky wonky stories as soon as they're released. Until then, it's time for me to shut this video down. Make sure to give Boba Cat some pats, snacks, and playtime before you log out, and head to the description of this video to find links for every other corner of cyberspace I'm on. Thanks for letting me chat with you in this fashionably late video, and until next time, happy 12th anniversary of the Caged Underworld!